Good afternoon and Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to the State Water Board Staff Workshop on the Draft Wastewater Arrearage Program Guidelines. My name is Gergagan Chand, and I am a Water Resource Control Engineer within the State Water Board's Division of Water Quality. I'll be acting as today's host and leading today's presentation. With me today are also Rich Brewer and Rebecca Greenwood, also from the Division of Water Quality, Karen Mogus, the Deputy Director of the Division of Water Quality, Salika Potter with the Division of Financial Assistance, and our attorneys Julie Osborne and Ann Hartridge with the Office of Chief Counsel. So the purpose of today's workshop is to provide an overview of the Draft Wastewater Arrearages Program Guidelines. During this workshop, interested parties will be given the opportunity to provide feedback or ask questions to staff regarding the draft guidelines. And as a reminder, today's workshop is for informational purposes only, and no formal action will be taken today. Finally, all information provided during this workshop will be available at the State Water Board's Water and Wastewater Arrearage Payment Program webpage, in which the URL is shown on the current slide, as shown. Furthermore, this workshop is being recorded and webcasted. Questions will be answered to the best of staff's ability. This PowerPoint presentation, as well as the audio recording, will be provided also on the State Water Board Water and Wastewater Arrearage Payment Program webpage, and which you can view at your own leisure. For today's workshop, it's being provided in two formats. The first format is if you just want to view the meeting through the Cal EPA webcast. You can type in video.calepa.ca.gov, and it should take you to the main webcast page where this meeting can be found. While viewing the webcast, if there are any questions or comments that come up as we walk through the presentation, feel free to send an email of those questions or comments to www.arrearages@waterboards.ca.gov. The second format to participate in today's workshop is through Zoom. Participants should have already received a link to the Zoom meeting prior to the start of the workshop. If you are needing technical support connecting to Zoom, please contact the email www.arrearages@waterboards.ca.gov with the subject line Technical Support, and Waterboard staff will try their best to troubleshoot the issue. During the questions and comments portion of today's workshop, if you are participating through Zoom, you can raise your virtual hand to verbally ask a question or provide a comment. Additionally, you can also type in your question or feedback in the Zoom chat box, and staff will read the question or comment on your behalf. For folks participating via the Cal EPA webcast, please email questions or comments to the email provided on this screen, and staff will also read the question or comment on your behalf. So now that we're through with the meeting logistics, for today's presentation, we will first provide a brief background into the overall Arrearages program. Staff will then provide an overview of the Draft Wastewater Arrearage Program Guidelines. And following the overview, we will take a 15-minute break so that folks can take a quick stretch and formulate their questions or comments. We will then proceed to the questions and comments portion of the workshop and then finally conclude with an overview of the next steps. So without further ado, we will first start off with what an arrearage is and how it is being defined per the proposed guidelines. An arrearage is any money owed to a water or wastewater system from non-payment of residential and commercial accounts that accrued from completed billing periods during the COVID-19 pandemic billing relief period. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Congress passed the American Rescue Plan Act in March of 2021, which opened up approximately $985 million in federal funding to be allocated by the California State Legislature. The California State Water Resources Control Board is the lead agency that has been tasked with creating the Water and Wastewater Arrearages Payment Program as a way to provide relief for customers of community water and wastewater systems for unpaid bills accrued during the pandemic. Out of the $985 million, approximately $350 million has been allocated to water systems for unpaid water bills. The leftover funds of approximately $600 million is designated to provide customer relief for unpaid wastewater utility bills. So as indicated in the previous slide, the first phase of this funding program was prioritized for water systems to provide financial assistance to customers with unpaid drinking water bills. On September 21st, 2021, the State Water Board adopted the Drinking Water Arrearage Program guidelines, establishing the criteria and procedure on how water systems can apply for arrearage funding. The, the deadline to submit applications under the Drinking Water Arrearage Program was December 6, 2021, and shortly thereafter, the Drinking Water Arrearage Program guidelines were amended to clarify tax reporting requirements based on guidance provided by the Internal Revenue Service, or IRS. Here on this slide, you can see the proposed timeline for the second phase of the Arrearages program, which revolves around arrearage funding for unpaid wastewater or sewer bills, which is going to be the crux of the conversation for today's workshop. On December 17th, 2021, State Water Board staff released amendments to the Drinking Water Arrearage Guidelines to add in guidelines for the proposed Wastewater Arrearage program. Staff are currently hosting the public workshop overviewing the draft amendments today, and the formal comment period concludes the day after tomorrow around noon. Following that, the State Water Board will be having a board meeting scheduled for January 19th, 2022, in which the board will consider for adoption the draft amendments, adding in the Wastewater Arrearage Program guidelines as Appendix A. And then sometime in early February, staff is planning on hosting an application webinar or a recording of a webinar to go over how applicants can complete the online application process to receive funding for wastewater arrears. So that was a brief overview of the background to this Arrearages program and the current projected project timeline we're looking at. At this time, I will now be shifting over and providing an overview of the proposed Wastewater Arrearage Program guidelines. So the first topic of today's discussion will be around the item of program eligibility. There are two main categories of entities that are eligible to apply for funding under the proposed guidelines. The first category are wastewater treatment providers that are defined as a city, county, special district, or joint powers authority, and these are entities that provide wastewater collection, treatment, or disposal services through a publicly owned treatment works, or POTW. This definition is straight from statute, specifically the California Health and Safety Code. The second category of eligible applicants are wastewater billing entities, and this is a category staff are proposing within the draft guidelines. These are your local government entities, such as a city, county, or special district, that bills on behalf of a wastewater treatment provider. By adding in this category of applicants, staff are hoping to capture situations in which it is not the wastewater treatment facility or POTW that does the direct billing for wastewater services, but rather it's the county or the city or the county property tax rolls in which wastewater fees are assessed. Moving over to the period of eligibility, available funding for accrued residential and commercial customer arrearages is strictly for those arrears that accrued between the time period of March 4th, 2020 to June 15th, 2021. Moving on to expenditures that are covered under the proposed wastewater arrearages program. These would include items such as residential customer wastewater debt, some limited commercial customer wastewater debt, and this would include your commercial enterprises such as your restaurants, hotels, office buildings, government or military facilities, hospitals, schools, places of worship, and so on and so forth. And finally, approved applicants would also be eligible for reimbursement of administrative costs that the applicant incurred in applying for assistance or complying with program requirements. And this amount is capped at 3% of the total allotted arrearages, or up to $1 million, whichever is less. When it comes to items that are not being proposed to be covered under the Wastewater Arrearages program. What is not included are some limited commercial customers, specifically industrial facilities such as manufacturing, refineries, or animal and food processing, as well as agricultural irrigation and landscape irrigation. Funding would also not be available to cover any late fees or interest accrued on the unpaid wastewater bills. To participate under the proposed program, approved applicants would need to waive any late fees assessed or interest accrued, as I mentioned in the previous slide. Bill credits will need to be credited to customer accounts within 60 days of receiving payment from the State Water Board. Customers will also need to be provided written notification from the approved applicant notifying them that the wastewater treatment provider or wastewater billing entity has received arrearage funding from the State Water Board and that the funds have been credited to the customer account. Participating applicants will also need to comply with the terms and conditions of payment, and I'll speak a little bit more about this in the next slide. And finally, approved applicants will also need to submit a report on expenditures and customer credits. So this is basically a report documenting where and how the funds were spent. So when it comes to the application process, to receive funding under this program, staff will be asking applicants to provide the following pieces of documentation. The first piece is the record or the number of customer accounts in arrears and for what amount. Staff will also be requesting a completed disbursement request form, which is a summary of the total arrearage funding requests as it is signed off by the authorized representative of the applicant or their designee. A conditions of payment form in which the applicant will certify that the arrearage funds will be used according to the proposed guidelines as established under the program will also need to be submitted. And then again, this form is just to ensure that the funds will not be misused. And finally, a tax ID request form will also need to be submitted such that the State Water Board knows where to be sending off the check for approved applicants. Templates for all of these documents and forms will be provided by the State Water Board for applicants to complete, and those templates will be provided at a later time. So moving on, once an applicant is approved for arrearage funds, if they are a wastewater treatment provider or a wastewater billing entity that directly bills customer accounts, then a direct credit needs to be applied to the customer account for the outstanding arrearages within 60 days of receiving payment. For arrearage debt that has been since transferred to a third-party entity, such as a debt collection agency, the approved applicant can provide a credit in one of three ways. So the first method is by directly making a payment to the third-party entity to eliminate or reduce the customer's wastewater arrearage debt. The second option is to refund the credited amount directly to the customer by issuing a check. That way, the customer then has the option to either pay down the third-party debt that was transferred over. And then finally, the wastewater treatment provider or the wastewater billing entity can also use the funds and create a positive balance for the customer to apply towards future wastewater or sewer bills. So when it comes to unallocated funds, approved applicants must remit any funds not credited to customers back to the State Water Board within 6 months of receiving payment. Further instructions on this process will be provided at a later time. And finally, when it comes to consumer debt reporting, approved applicants must agree to not furnish information regarding arrearages for which credits have been provided to customers to any consumer reporting agency. And for situations in which that information has already been furnished over, within 30 days of receiving payment, if approved under this proposed program, approved applicants shall instruct consumer reporting agencies to delete information and cease further furnishing of information. So that concludes today's overview of the proposed wastewater arrearages program guidelines. We will be taking a short break, but before that, I'll be reviewing how to participate in the questions and comments portion of today's segment again. So again, if you're participating through Zoom, please raise your virtual hand to verbally ask a question or provide a comment. You can also provide your question or feedback within the Zoom chat box. If you're feeling camera shy or just don't want to speak, and staff will read your question or comment on your behalf. If you're participating via webcast as well, you can also send in your questions or comments by emailing the email address that is shown on the screen, and that is www.arrearages@waterboards.ca.gov. We will now take a break and we'll resume at 1:40. So again, the instructions to participate within the questions and comments session of today's workshop are shown above. See you then. Thank you. All right, it's 1:40, so we will resume back with the workshop and move on to the question and comment session. And so hopefully everyone had time to get a glass of water, go for a stretch break. Directions on how to ask questions or comments either through Zoom or if you're viewing through webcast are provided on the slide for reference. But we'll just begin with any questions or comments. So if you do have a question or comment and you're in Zoom, feel free to raise your virtual hand. I do see that we do have a couple of comments that were provided in the chat box during break. So we'll address those first and then move on to any raised hands. So starting with the first question, it's from Heidi Oriel. Apologies if I've mispronounced any names also. Question is, we are a wastewater treatment provider that bills customers through 4 different wastewater billing entities. How should our application be structured? Should we submit one application for our whole wastewater service area, or should there be 4 applications, one for each of our 4 wastewater billing entities? So great question. And this would honestly depend on how your billing system is structured. And so if you are the wastewater treatment provider and you have the capability to directly credit those customer accounts that are billed through those 4 different wastewater billing entities, you can submit one aggregated application for all on behalf of those 4 wastewater billing entities. And that just means that the billing entities wouldn't be able to apply for those arrearage funds. If you don't have that capability to directly credit those customer accounts, well, then the recommendation would be that each of those 4 would have to file a separate application linking you as the main wastewater treatment provider that they are billing on behalf of. So hopefully that answered your question. If not, feel free to respond back to the chat box or raise your hand as well. Second question is from Debbie Webster. So it's more of a minor comment. In the definitions of the residential customer, wastewater customers should be acknowledged, or a second definition may be needed due to billing through property tax. And so in the definitions that are provided in the draft guidelines, we define residential customer as a water service or wastewater treatment provider or a wastewater treatment provider customers, which include groundwater well owners charged for water in managed basins residing in single-family residences, multifamily residences, mobile homes, including but not limited to mobile homes and mobile home parks, or farm worker housing that receives a bill for water. So that's how it is currently established, and Debbie's recommendation is to include or bill for water or sewer service at the end of that. And so, yeah, we can definitely make that change to the draft guidelines to make it to provide additional clarity. And that's all the questions, comments I see in the chat box for now. Rebecca, do we have any questions from email?
At this time, we do not have any questions in the inbox.
Okay. Rich, would you be able to facilitate? I can't see who has their hands up or not. Does anybody have their hand up?
Yes, Heidi, I'm sorry, Andrea Abergall. I'm sorry.
Hi, can you hear me?
Loud and
Yes.
clear.
Great, thank you. My name is Andrea Abergel, and I'm with the California Municipal Utilities Association. CMUA represents 50 public water and wastewater agencies that collectively deliver drinking water to over 75% of California. Our association has been intimately involved with the passage of the enabling legislation and the implementation of the California Water and Wastewater Arrearage Payment Program. And we're very pleased that the Water Board is proceeding with the wastewater portion of the overall program. And we appreciate the board's efforts to get this program started expeditiously. We just have one substantive comment to make regarding information collected by water and wastewater service providers. We request that entities that provide both services not be required to fill out another tax identification form for the wastewater program. We also request that the Water Board recognize that entities that are already within the financial information system for California be able to choose where they want their checks to be sent. We represent public agencies whose finance departments are in a different location than where the responsible person is, and enabling those affected entities to choose where their checks are sent would help to streamline processing immensely. And generally, we encourage the Water Board to get the payments out as quickly as possible and applaud the March 1st, 2022 internal deadline that's suggested in the draft amended guidelines. And we thank you very much for your efforts to implement the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea, for those comments. Just to add in a bit, we could definitely add in some additional flexibility during the actual online application process to take into consideration those items that you mentioned. So appreciate the comments. Rich, would you be able to call on the next person?
Yes, Lorian Fono.
Hi, I'm Lorian Fono. I'm the Executive Director of the Bay Area Clean Water Agencies. I have a couple of questions. The first is how should an agency apply when their billing period doesn't overlap with the COVID relief period? So if part of their billing period falls within that, or if their billing period is larger, do they prorate it, or are they eligible for to be reimbursed for their entire billing period?
Yeah, great question. So we would ask, or I believe the guidelines do establish a way to prorate those billing periods that are outside the time frame that is established. And so it would be a prorated bill request that you would be asking for those arrearage funds.
Thanks. And my second question has to do with the lack of eligibility of interest payments. So agencies, this is something that agencies are carrying on behalf due to the non-payment of their customers. Is it something that is baked into the statute that forbids them from requesting relief for the interest payments, or was that limitation developed by the State Water Board?
Great question. I'm going to ask our attorney, Julie Osborne. Julie, would you be able to address Lorian's question on that one?
That was a decision made by the board, but based on the statute that is pretty specific, that is for wastewater arrearages. Obviously the statute doesn't say anything about interest specifically, but it's not for anything other than wastewater and water arrearages.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The next question is from Jared Voskul.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Jared Voskul, Manager of Regulatory Affairs for CASA, the California Association of Sanitation Agencies. First, just thanks to staff on all this great work on such an expedited timeline, getting this prepared. I wanted to follow up on Lauren's question on the prorating. We'd had this issue mentioned by several of our members, also BACWA members. for the property taxes, and in the guidelines themselves, I didn't see the direct provisions related to that. I don't know if I was not searching for the right term, but if you could maybe point us to that just so we could review it, we'd appreciate that.
Okay. Yeah. Trying to go through the guidelines. Yes?
I think that's something that we're gonna have to talk about in-house and get back to people on, and make sure that we're all on the same page.
Okay,
We'll definitely provide a follow-up for that.
thank you.
Right. Next question is Mike McCullough. Mike?
Thank you. Mike McCullough, Monterey One Water. In regards to the timing, I know that the timing was through June of 2021, and I've heard that there's been entities that are requesting potentially extending that to December 2021. Is that just a rumor, or is that something that both the water and the wastewater arrearage program will be looking at to maybe extend that deadline to get more funds out?
No, the period of eligibility is only from March 4, 2020 to June 15, 2021. So no extensions.
I think that was, Julie may want to comment. I believe that was statutory, right, Julie?
Yes, that is statutory, and that's a hard deadline. And under our program, once we've issued one check to an entity, we can't issue any more checks for water. One for water, one for wastewater, and that's it. Under the how this program is working, so we wouldn't be able to later on change it.
I don't see any other hands up. Anybody else? Debbie Webster? Debbie?
Sure, thank you. This is Debbie Webster with the Central Valley Clean Water Association. And again, I appreciate staff not only having this today, but also talking with us before. I know we talked a little bit prior that in the Central Valley, those industrial customers, especially those related to food processing type of work, or what you have defined in there, are some of the key customers of many of the wastewater treatment plants. And I was wondering, when we had talked to you, had said that you would think a little bit more about it. I know that there was some desire to remain in line with the water program, but I was wondering if that was something that you've given further consideration, and if so, what your thought process has been.
Yeah, I believe that was a question that had to do more with the statutory restrictions that we were implementing, and I'll let Julia answer a little bit more on that.
Well, based on our statutory reading, as I think we discussed before, the statute doesn't have a lot of information about wastewater. It basically says do the same as you do for the water side, and the water side's pretty clear: residential and commercial. And commercial for means what we have there, that long definition. I won't read that all for you guys, but certainly we've considered your thoughts on that, but at this point we don't see that as a direction we can go in. But we definitely will keep all your thoughts in mind, and we're not ignoring them.
All right. Next question, Steve Jepson. Steve.
Hi, this is Steve Jepson, Executive Director for the Southern California Alliance of Publicly Owned Treatment Works, or SCAP. And I'm curious how recycled water fits into the program. We've had drinking water, and now we're working on wastewater. And does recycled water fit in with wastewater? I know there are limitations on industrial customers and irrigation and ag, but there could be some recycled water entities that are affected. So I wanted to hear what the water board had to say about that. And by the way, we really do appreciate all your efforts in streamlining this wastewater arrearages too. Thank you.
Yeah, so great question. When it comes to how the statute was drafted, it's specifically for wastewater services as well as drinking water services. And so when it comes to recycled water, that will probably have to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And will the entity will most likely have to demonstrate how the recycled water aspect of those fees are related to the wastewater aspect of the arrearages that are being requested.
I will add that generally, from a treatment perspective, recycled water generally ends up being the wastewater side. And certainly, generally, you should be able to either be qualified for the water side or qualify for the wastewater side for your recycled water. And so I would encourage you to work with both the folks in water quality and the folks in drinking water to make sure that you're covered under one or the other. But if you're not already in the water arrearages, you're too late. So
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Rich, are there any other hands that are raised right now?
No, there are not.
Okay,
Anyone else? I'm not seeing anything more in the chat either. How about the arrearages site, Rebecca?
There are no questions currently in the arrearages email inbox.
Okay. In that case, if there are any questions that come up in the future that you guys that are thought of, always open for comments and questions, anything to help with this project. And those questions or comments can be sent to www.arrearages@waterboards.ca.gov. I do see that there's a question of, will this presentation be posted somewhere after? And the answer is yes. It will be posted on the State Water Board's Arrearages payment webpage shortly after this workshop concludes. And so we'll have the presentation and the audio recording of this workshop posted.
We have one more. Do you see the other one, Guru? We have one more.
Yes.
question there.
So how long do you expect the dispersing of funds to take after March 1st, 2022? And so February, we're trying to get this program out and ready for applications to start early February, with the hope that we can start pushing out payments by March 1st of 2022. And that will take as long as it needs to take up until the close of the application period, that I will be touching bases on in the incoming slides. There are other restrictions that are placed in the sense that funds have to be dispersed by the end of the fiscal year, but depending on how many applications we get, we'll begin March 1st and then however long time is needed afterwards.
I'm just wondering, Guru, if you want to just flash the one timeline slide. We had people that were half on the Cal EPA and half on the Zoom. Can you just go up to the timeline? It just involves the next couple of weeks, so they chance to see that again. Right.
Yeah.
One more down. There you go. Thanks.
So this is again the timeline that we're looking at. The December 17 of last year was when the guidelines were released. Tomorrow is the close of the comment period. So please do submit your comments in by noon tomorrow if there's any additional comments you would like to provide in writing. And then jumping ahead to January 19, that is when we have our board meeting, which will be going up to the board for consideration of adoption of the draft guidelines. And then early February is when we plan on having the application period open, and we are also hoping to have a tentative plan to get a staff application webinar so that we can show how to apply for these arrearages fundings.
We had a couple of more chat questions, Guru.
Yeah, okay, so this one is from Terry Dean Alderson. If we went through vetting for water due to customer assistance program, will that save us time for wastewater? that is a question that we will need to discuss a little bit further, and it might need to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And the next question is from Devin. Hi, I have a similar question to Heidi's. We are a water agency who manage multiple county sanitation districts. Would we submit a separate application for each district or one aggregate application covering all the districts we serve? So yeah, similar to Heidi, if your billing system has the capability of directly crediting those customer accounts that are in arrears, you can submit one application under just the single aggregate sanitation agency. If your billing entity, if your billing system doesn't have that capability and it's only the separate districts that have control of bills for customers, recommendation would be for those billing entities to apply separately. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay. In that case, going back, so moving on to next steps. As I mentioned earlier, another plug, please submit your written comments on the draft wastewater arrearages program by 12 p.m. noon tomorrow, January 5th, 2022. And then the next step after that is for consideration of a board adoption of those guidelines during the January 19, 2022 board meeting. This next slide is intended to show that if everything goes as planned and the board adopts the draft guidelines, well then starting February 1st, the application period will be open for folks to submit their online applications. A link to the application online portal will be posted on our website, and folks can check that out as well. Starting March 1st, 2022, we'll begin disbursement of funds to approved applicants. And then March 30th is when the application period will close for the wastewater arrearages program. Additional information can be found on the California Water and Wastewater Arrearage Payment Program webpage. We'll be using this webpage to provide additional updates as needed, so frequently do visit that for new announcements, as well as the State Water Resources Control Board email LIRIS list. And so if you haven't signed up for the LIRIS already, you can subscribe by going to the State Water Board email notification section on the webpage, I believe, and then subscribe to Arrearage Payment Program, COVID Relief. And then under Drinking Water Topics section, you can select Arrearage Payment Program, COVID Relief. And then finally, under contact, feel free to send us an email anytime at www.arrearages@waterboards.ca.gov.
Steve Jepson has another question here.
Oh, okay. Steve.
Thank you. Yeah, I just caught that March 30th deadline for the application process. It seems pretty tight. Is there a reason for that?
It's 2 months, and so it's just for consistency, and we do have internal restrictions as to how long we can keep this money since it is federal money, and so that's part of the reason why we want to close it off at that time frame, but also to provide expedited assistance to the folks that have these arrearages so that they can quickly get those payments out.
Can I add to that, Gur?
Yes.
The drinking water program also had a 60-day application period and then had somewhat of a leeway of a couple of weeks, if I recall correctly, whereby they were trying to get the last stragglers into the application period. I anticipate that we will have that sort of leeway at the end, early April as well. But Gur is right. We need to get these funds out the door quickly.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Steve. I see other questions are trickling in the chat box. So, one second. So this question is from Mega. Hi, we are a regional wastewater facility and our wastewater fees are collected through the county via property taxes. Will the county be the agency to apply for this program? Correct. The county would apply for this program. And again, unless your regional wastewater facility has access to the county records and can directly credit those customer accounts, the county would be applying as a wastewater billing entity for those outstanding arrears. Next question is from Jennifer. Can we collect on accounts that have been closed, sold after the timeline, but still have a past due bill on their account that has not been collected? Julie, would you be able to answer that question?
Yes, you can. As long as it is still on the account and still not written off or anything like that, you can go ahead and submit it to us.
Thanks, Julie. So yeah, unless there's any further questions within Zoom or in the emails, last call for emails, Rebecca?
No, still no emails in the Arrearages inbox.
Okay. I'd like to thank everyone for their participation and for their time for attending today's workshop. Again, these slides and a recording of this workshop will be posted on the webpage. And if you haven't already, please sign up for our Lyris email subscription. Thank you all and have a great day.